It's great to be here. I think it is my 5th conference now, and it's great to see a lot of friends here. I moved to China in 2005, thinking that I would go there and be a semiconductor investor, and then quickly realized that, wow, it is a very different market. Semiconductor is a tough market, tough to make business. There's Taiwanese, there's Europeans, there's Americans, Singaporeans, everybody you can think of are there. But there's a little thing called internet, seems to be growing pretty fast, and there are a lot of users on it. There are no ways to monetize it, but hey, who knows, over time, maybe somebody will figure something out. And it was with that insight that, hey, over time, this may be the easiest place by going online to build a national business in a country of 1.3 million people, where under communist rule, it's very difficult to scale offline. By being online, everything seems faster and ends up being easier. And that insight helped me to end up where I am today by making a lot of investments both in the US and also in emerging markets worldwide. Why does it matter to find the next billion users? There's a ton of stuff to do in New York, a ton of stuff to do in Silicon Valley. America is a great place to invest. We spend time going to Seattle, to LA, to different parts of East Coast. And Silicon Valley, San Francisco alone is booming. However, when you look at those statistics, 10 years ago, when Alibaba first launched Tmall and first launching e-commerce in a more major fashion, they started a Singles Day promotion on November 11. You're all alone. In Chinese, it's Double 11. You don't have any date. You're by yourself. You're kind of a loser. So what do? You shop to make yourself feel better. So that's how they started that promotion. $8 million sales happened that day. Quickly, 10 years later, it grew by 4,000x to 31 billion. And Alibaba, obviously, as a group, is a $500 billion company listed in New York. At the same time, in the US, promotions still grew. You look at Cyber Monday and Black Friday, over that 10-year period, the combined sales also grew 4x, but it wasn't the same. And you look at what was happening in China from an internet space standpoint, user only doubled, yet the world changed because everybody got used to do things online. So going online seems like the best way to scale business, even in a control-oriented communist party. I'm going to share with 5 facts that kind of help us to think through why we're excited to find out where are the next billion users. We look at users' growth, internet on a worldwide basis, a lot of growth coming from smartphone. And when you look at where the smartphone users are coming from, 3 places stand out. Over the next 3 years, from 2018 to 2021, we're expecting 750 million new net adds of smartphone users. And 2/3 of them are in 3 places: India, Latin, mostly in Brazil, and then Southeast Asia, with Indonesia being the biggest market. That's actually about 8 or 9 cities. It's Sao Paulo, it's Bogota, it's Mexico City, it's Jakarta, it's Bangalore, it's New Delhi. So obviously, you can tell my travel schedule, I go to these places quite a bit. And many of these users that are coming online are very young. Almost half of them are under 24 years in age. All of us have kids, many of us have kids, and when I see my daughter and my son, one is 7-year-old, one's 11-year-old, and every single they see, they automatically want to touch it and move things. They grew up on iPad. They grew up listening to Spotify. They grew up looking at shows on YouTube. They spend more time on YouTube than all the TV time I ever spent in my life. It's amazing how digitally native the users are, and so they're so used to coming and trying new things. And when we look at China, one of the lessons we learned, is Joe Tsai, the vice chairman of Alibaba, mentioned this as well. Back in 2009, he noticed that GDP per capita for China was just around $4,000 on a current dollar basis. So it's nominal, not PPP. And since then, e-commerce took off. And back then, it was only one unicorn in China, and that was Taobao. You look at some of the other countries, whether it's Indonesia, Brazil, India, where the most users are coming from, you look at their GDP per capita, there's a slice of the population that has that. Indonesia, 264 million people total. Average GDP per capita is just around $4,000. For Brazil, obviously it had been up and down, but its GDP per capita is relatively high on a global basis. For India, about 500 million people, the average of that is about 4,000 GDP per capita. This is why these countries, despite some of the early bubble that people are seeing, people still feel in the long run there's going to be a lot of growth ahead. This is the funding for 2018 for these places. We love New York. We spent a lot of time in New York. New York has 20 unicorns. Yet you look at some of these other emerging markets where the next billion users are coming from, they're still actually underinvested. You look at India, already 19 unicorns with 500 million people averaging $4,000 US GDP per capita, versus China, same GDP per capita for 1.2 billion people, only 1 unicorn. You can say and argue India is definitely inflated and there's a bubble. However, if you think what India could be in the future, China has about 150 unicorns right now. And if you think that in 10 years, India could be 40% of China, that's still 70 unicorns that could be made. So there's still plenty of growth ahead for that country. A day in life of users. We poll users in these regions, and it's amazing to see all the things that they want to solve or want to do look all very similar to each other. Everybody has a kind of mind body app they go to. They use the ride-sharing app for commuting. There's mobile payment. So you see a lot of busy logos. But you look more closely, when it comes to more messaging, entertainment, pop culture, or more broader, thinner app, you see a lot of apps from US that dominate, with ByteDance and TikTok the only exception. But if you look at the individual verticals, you start to see a lot more local players emerging with local adaptations, even though the philosophy are very similar across the table. You look at food delivery. There's obviously there's Uber Eats and DoorDash here in the US. Then you look at India, you see Swiggy and Zomato. In Brazil, you see iFood going at it against Rappi. In Indonesia, you see Grab and Gojek going at it. With enough funding and people who have gone through the history of what's really happening in China and US, you do see pattern emerging. You see similar movie being played out. You see the similar behavior happen. As a VC, we try to share what we know and help people to avoid excess and try to figure out how do you get to a more equilibrium or consolidation sooner and faster. I'm going to quickly tell you a story of 5 founders. The commonality among these are the people that are building the next generation companies that's already $1 billion in valuation, serving the next billion users. Yet all of them come from very interesting backgrounds. Logi, logistics player, automated in Brazil, founded by a gentleman who's from France, lived in Brazil for 10 years, had a first startup that looked more like the Uber of that time, couldn't raise enough money, had it folded, and ended up doing the second one, now just reached $1 billion in valuation. We're lucky to be an investor. SoftBank put most of the money to get them to where they are right now. But when you're inside their warehouse, seeing everything automated, with machinery coming from India, coming from China, coming from Germany, it's extremely impressive. Not only were we impressed by what he has gone through in his second startup, and therefore bet on him, his comments on the machinery he used also helped us make the second investment in China, in Geek Plus, because he said out of every machine that he has tested, Geek Plus was one that had the best value performance. It's cheap, like an Indian product, but performs like a German product. So it's very easy for us to realize that, hey, if we only do investment in China, this becomes very easy local play, only for local market. But in reality, it's a global play. So by having more data points, it helps us to see more. Tokopedia, William, didn't speak a word in English when Lydia from SoftBank met him. And he learned and practiced to get better. He comes from a small town and ended up building a company that's #1 in e-commerce in Indonesia. You look at Shopee, founder came from Tianjin, China, was fortunate enough to get to Stanford GSP for MBA 10 years ago, ended up going to Singapore thereafter and built up 2 startups, Garena and Shopee, that has a combined market cap of 14 billion. You look at the founders of Udon, their first startup, they're all from IIT network. First startup was Flipkart. They learned and struggled, see all the things that work and didn't work for Flipkart, and learn the lessons. Now they're building the fastest B2C commerce player in India. It is extremely inspirational for some of us to go to their office and just see that it's raw and they come from poor backgrounds, but they have so much that they have learned that they're willing to share and change the world. For us as VC, just like the panelists before me, we're so fortunate to be part of their journey. Thank you.